Imagine a cold winter morning. The alarm clock rings, but it feels easier to pull the blanket over your head than to get up. You want to start jogging every morning because you promised yourself you'd get in shape this year. You've even bought new running shoes and downloaded a workout playlist. But every time the alarm sounds, that mental battle begins. Should I get up and run, or should I stay in bed for just 5 more minutes? Most of us know which side usually wins. It isn't that we're lazy or lack discipline, it's that starting often feels harder than continuing. This is where James Clear's idea in Atomic Habits known as the 2-minute rule quietly changes the game. The idea is breathtakingly simple, but it works like a charm. Make your new habits so small that it takes less than 2 minutes to start. If you want to read more, commit to reading just 1 page. If you want to journal, write just 1 sentence. If you want to do yoga, do it for 2 minutes. And here's why it works so beautifully. It lowers the barrier of entry. It removes the voice in your head that says, I don't have time, because who doesn't have 2 minutes? It's not about staying at 2 minutes forever. It's about mastering the first step. Once you do that, it becomes much easier to keep going. Think of it like this. The hardest part of working out is usually tying your shoelaces and stepping out the door. Once you're out, you're likely to keep going for longer than 2 minutes. The hardest part of reading is picking up the book and sitting down. The hardest part of writing is opening the notebook and writing the first word. Once the engine starts running, it often keeps running. This principle, though it sounds simple, has transformed countless lives because it helps us build consistency instead of chasing perfection. James Clear writes, a habit must be established before it can be improved. Imagine you want to meditate every morning. Most people start by aiming for 20 minutes. It sounds reasonable, even impressive, but soon, they miss one day, then another, and slowly, meditation becomes another failed resolution. Instead, if you start with just 2 minutes of breathing deeply each morning, it's almost impossible to skip. You'd barely notice the effort. And soon, 2 minutes might turn into 3, then 5, then 10. But that growth comes naturally, without pressure. Why does this work? Because habits are built by repetition, not duration. Running for 2 minutes every day builds a stronger habit than running for 30 minutes once a week. Small, consistent actions change our identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who shows up. I'm a runner starts with I run, even if it's for 2 minutes. Identity change is what keeps habits alive. The 2-minute rule helps you do this by making it so easy to show up that you almost can't fail. Let's talk about real life. Think about brushing your teeth. Most of us do it without thinking, because it's automatic. It takes around 2 minutes, but you never question whether to do it. That's the magic of habit. Now imagine applying the same effortless commitment to other areas. Studying, writing, reading, exercising, learning a new skill. It all starts with small, non-threatening steps. Some people worry that 2 minutes isn't enough to make progress. But remember, the goal at the beginning isn't progress, it's consistency. Once you establish consistency, the progress will come almost as a side effect. It's like planting a seed. You wouldn't expect it to become a tree overnight. But if you water it every day, even if it takes just a few moments, it will grow. In our fast-paced world, we often fall into the trap of go big or go home. We want dramatic transformation overnight. We want to go from never jogging to running 5 kilometers daily, from not reading at all to finishing a book every week. But these ambitious starts rarely last because they depend on motivation. Motivation is a wonderful spark, but it's unreliable as fuel. Some days you wake up motivated, some days you don't. The 2-minute rule isn't about motivation, it's about designing an environment where starting feels effortless. Imagine your goal is to write a novel. The dream feels enormous, and every time you sit at your desk, the blank page feels intimidating. Instead of telling yourself, I'll write for an hour, tell yourself, I'll write 1 sentence. Anyone can write a single sentence. And often, after you write that sentence, you might feel like writing a second one, then a paragraph, then a page. Even if you stop after the first sentence, you've still kept the habit alive. That's what matters. James Clear's approach in Atomic Habits is grounded in science. He explains that habits are built through a feedback loop. Cue, craving, response, reward. The 2-minute rule makes the response so easy that the loop keeps running, and the small reward, the satisfaction of completing your mini, reinforces the habit. Over time, your brain associates the habit with success, not struggle. Let's talk about another example, learning a language. Most people download an app and start with excitement, promising to practice 30 minutes daily. But after a week, life gets busy, and the habit fades. Instead, what if your goal was to open the app and do 1 exercise, something that takes less than 2 minutes? It's not intimidating, and often, once you start, you'll do more. But the key is, you don't have to. This principle also applies beautifully to decluttering. If your house feels overwhelming, don't aim to clean the whole thing in 1 day. Start by putting away just 1 item. Tomorrow, another. Small steps compound. The same applies to finances. Instead of trying to overhaul your budget in a night, spend 2 minutes tracking expenses each day. The deeper idea behind the 2-minute rule is that it helps you fall in love with the process, not just the outcome. Big goals can feel far away and demotivating, but showing up daily, even in a small way, feels achievable and satisfying. You learn to enjoy the act of running, writing, studying, not just the distant reward. One thing people ask, won't this keep me stuck at a tiny habit? Not really. Think of it as an entry point, a ritual that leads you into a bigger habit. After all, nobody plans to brush their teeth for an hour, but brushing twice a day keeps your teeth healthy for life. Similarly, starting small makes it easier to grow naturally over time. James Clear also talks about gateway habits. The 2-minute rule creates a gateway to bigger habits. For instance, folding one shirt often leads to folding the rest. Writing one sentence often leads to writing a paragraph. Once you're in motion, inertia helps you keep going. Newton's first law applies here too. An object in motion stays in motion. Another powerful aspect of the 2-minute rule is that it helps you beat procrastination. Procrastination often comes from overwhelm. When a task feels too big, we avoid it. But if the task is so tiny that it feels silly to skip, we're more likely to start. And starting is half the battle. Imagine how this could transform your mornings. Instead of snoozing the alarm, your rule could be, get out of bed and stand for 2 minutes. Once you're up, you're less likely to go back to sleep. Or your rule could be, put on my workout clothes. That tiny action often leads to doing the workout. Some people like to combine the 2-minute rule with habit stacking, attaching a new tiny habit to an existing routine. For example, after brushing your teeth, meditate for 2 minutes. After making coffee, write one sentence in your journal. This creates a strong cue, making the new habit easier to remember. In workplaces, the same principle applies. Instead of aiming to clear your inbox every morning, commit to answering just one email. Instead of trying to brainstorm a whole project plan, write down the first idea. Momentum builds naturally. What makes this approach sustainable is that it respects human nature. We all have days when we're tired, busy, or unmotivated. The 2-minute rule makes it possible to keep your streak alive even on bad days. Over months and years, this consistency beats occasional bursts of intensity. Think of an athlete training for years. It's not the occasional heroic workout that makes them great, it's the thousands of ordinary practice sessions. The 2-minute rule helps ordinary people build that kind of quiet discipline. There's also an emotional benefit. When you set huge goals and fail to meet them, you feel disappointed, even ashamed. But when you keep your goals tiny and achievable, you experience daily wins. This builds confidence and self-trust. You become the kind of person who keeps promises to yourself. Imagine telling your future self, I'll read 1 page a night. Over a year, that could turn into dozens of books. Not because you forced yourself to read for hours, but because you showed up every day. That's the power of compounding. In his book, James Clear uses many real-life stories to illustrate these ideas. One story is about a reader who wanted to floss daily. Instead of forcing himself to floss all his teeth, he started by flossing just one tooth each night. It sounds silly, but it worked. Soon, flossing became automatic. This approach can seem too simple to work, but think about how habits shape your identity. You're not trying to run a marathon on day one. You're trying to become the kind of person who runs. You're not trying to write a bestseller immediately. You're trying to become someone who writes. The 2-minute rule removes the friction between you and your goal. It makes the habit so small that it feels easier to do than to skip. Over time, this creates a sense of inevitability. Of course, I'll do it. It only takes a moment. One interesting thing is that 2 minutes is symbolic. It could be 1 minute, 5 minutes. The exact time doesn't matter. The key is to make the habit so easy it doesn't trigger resistance. As your habit becomes part of your identity, you can scale it, but don't rush. Many people sabotage themselves by adding too much too soon. Trust the process. Let your consistency build confidence first. In summary, the 2-minute rule isn't about being lazy. It's about being strategic. It recognizes that human willpower is limited, but environment and design are powerful. By making the first step easy, you remove the biggest obstacle, starting. Over years, these small choices change your life. 1 page becomes a library of books read. 1 push-up becomes hundreds of workouts. 1 sentence becomes a finished novel. 1 mindful breath becomes years of meditation practice. In Atomic Habits, James Clear sums it up perfectly. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. The 2-minute rule is a simple, elegant system. It helps you build the habit of showing up, and that habit changes everything. So next time you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or uninspired, ask yourself, what's the 2-minute version of this? Then do it. Not because it's enough by itself, but because it's enough to start. Start small. Stay consistent. Trust the compounding effect of tiny actions over time. And remember, 2 minutes today might just change your life tomorrow. When you look at people who seem disciplined, productive, and always on track, it's tempting to think they have something you don't. An endless well of motivation, special genes, or superhuman willpower. But if you peel back the layers, you'll often discover something far simpler. Systems that make good choices easy and almost automatic. James Clear's 2-minute rule is one of those systems. It might look trivial on paper, but it quietly rewrites the story you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. At its heart, the rule recognizes a truth most of us overlook. The first step is often the heaviest. Once you take it, the rest usually follows. Imagine a huge, rusted flywheel. At first, pushing it feels impossible. It barely moves, but each small push adds momentum. Slowly, it starts to spin faster and faster until it turns on its own. The habit of starting is like pushing that flywheel every day, even if only for 2 minutes. Over months and years, the flywheel of your life starts spinning powerfully in the direction you've chosen. Think of a person who dreams of becoming an artist but struggles to find time or energy after work. Instead of committing to paint for an hour every evening, she starts by sketching for 2 minutes. Some days, she stops after that, but most days, she keeps going. A year later, her sketchbook is full, her confidence has grown, and painting has become part of who she is. It didn't start with heroic effort, but with humble consistency. What's beautiful about this approach is that it doesn't fight human nature, it works with it. We all have limited cognitive energy and decision-making strength. If a habit feels too big, our brains resist to conserve energy. But if it feels tiny and harmless, we slip past that resistance. And by repeating the tiny action daily, we create a neural pathway that grows stronger over time. A trail through the mental forest that becomes easier to follow each day. The 2-minute rule also frees us from the perfectionism that paralyzes so many good intentions. How many times have you told yourself, I'll start when I have more time, I need the perfect plan first, or what's the point if I can't do it properly? 2 minutes isn't perfect. It's enough. It reminds us that progress beats perfection, that doing something, however small, beats doing nothing. There's another hidden gift. This rule helps us rediscover joy in the activity itself. When the goal isn't a marathon workout or a flawless page of writing, but simply to show up, the pressure dissolves. You might find yourself enjoying the feel of the pen gliding over paper, the rhythm of your breath in meditation, or the quiet moment of reflection as you open your book. Habits stop being chores and start becoming rituals. James Clear often writes that true behavior change is identity change. You don't just run, you become a runner. You don't just write, you become a writer. The 2-minute rule helps build this identity layer by layer. Each small act is a vote for the person you want to become. Over time, the votes accumulate until there's no question about who you are. Consider an example in professional life. Imagine a salesperson who struggles with follow-up calls because it feels stressful. Using the 2-minute rule, the commitment becomes, I'll call one client. It's so simple that it feels silly not to do it. And often, that one call leads to a second, then a third. What once felt overwhelming becomes part of the daily rhythm. Parents can use this idea, too. Teaching a child to read doesn't have to mean sitting for an hour each night. It could begin with reading together for 2 minutes after dinner. The shared ritual matters far more than the length of time. And as the habit grows, so does the bond. This philosophy isn't limited to building habits. It can also dismantle bad ones. Imagine you want to reduce screen time instead of banning your phone completely. The 2-minute rule can help you build a competing positive habit. When I feel like scrolling, I'll read 2 pages of a book first. This creates a pause, a moment of choice that often redirects you. Even in relationships, the smallest gestures matter. Saying thank you, giving a compliment, or asking about your partner's day takes less than 2 minutes, but done daily, it nurtures connection. Over time, these tiny acts create a foundation of trust and affection. What makes this rule timeless is that it respects the truth that change isn't a single event. It's an unfolding process. We often overestimate what we can do in a day, but underestimate what we can do in a year. The 2-minute rule aligns us with the slow, steady rhythm of lasting transformation. Consider health. People spend billions chasing miracle diets or extreme workouts, yet the biggest predictor of long-term fitness is consistency. A daily walk, a few stretches, or 2 minutes of bodyweight exercise often does more than sporadic bursts of intensity. And once these habits feel natural, you can add more challenge gradually. In creative work, the same principle applies. Many writers, musicians, and artists don't wait for inspiration. They show up daily, even if only for a short time. The act of starting summons inspiration. As writer William Faulkner said, I only write when inspiration strikes. Fortunately, it strikes at 9 every morning. It's also worth noting that the 2-minute rule doesn't forbid doing more. If you feel motivated, keep going. But the brilliance is that even on your worst day, you've succeeded by showing up for 2 minutes. This keeps your self-image intact. I am someone who doesn't skip. Over the years, those who follow this approach often look back and realize how those humble 2-minute acts reshaped their lives. What seemed insignificant at the time added up to books written, skills learned, healthier bodies, stronger relationships, and greater inner peace. In our hyperdigital age, where attention is fragmented and distractions lurk everywhere, the 2-minute rule acts like an anchor. It brings us back to presence, to doing rather than endlessly planning or worrying. It reminds us that change happens in moments, not in imaginary future plans. James Clear's writing often circles back to this core idea. You don't need radical transformation overnight. You need small systems that guide daily action. The 2 rule is one of the simplest yet most powerful systems because it gently removes excuses and invites you to begin. Picture a sculptor faced with a giant block of marble. The final statue feels impossible. But instead of focusing on the end, the sculptor lifts the hammer and makes the first small chip, then another. Over days, weeks, and months, the form emerges. Change, too, is carved out of thousands of small actions. Sometimes people feel disappointed that the advice is so simple. They want something new, secret, or complicated. But real wisdom often hides in plain sight. The hardest part isn't knowing what to do, it's doing it. The 2-minute rule turns knowing into doing, and it scales beautifully. Once the basic habit is set, you can expand. Your 2-minute reading habit might grow into a nightly reading ritual. Your 2-minute stretch might lead to a 20-minute yoga practice. But it all starts with the easy step. If we zoom out to see life as a story, the small scenes matter as much as the dramatic moments. The daily routines, the small choices, the quiet moments of effort, these shape the narrative of who we are. The 2-minute rule helps us write those scenes intentionally, even spiritually. This idea resonates. Many traditions teach the importance of small daily rituals, a short prayer, a moment of gratitude, a simple act of kindness. Over time, these practices shape character more than grand gestures. In relationships, too, love isn't proven by big declarations alone, but by daily acts. Listening, caring, showing up. And most of those acts take just a moment or two. When the day feels heavy or your goals feel distant, remember, you don't have to finish today, you just have to start. And sometimes, that means something as small as writing one sentence, tying your shoelaces, or opening a book. Over time, these beginnings add up to a life you're proud of. One gentle, 2-minute step at a time. In many ways, the 2-minute rule isn't just about habits. It's about humility. It's about accepting that transformation doesn't always come from grand, heroic leaps, but often from small, almost invisible choices repeated quietly over time. It invites us to step away from the illusion of overnight success. The viral stories we see online of people who wake up one day, completely change, and suddenly become everything they've dreamed of. Instead, it turns our attention back to what's real, the slow, patient work of becoming. Imagine standing at the edge of a great forest you wish to explore. The path disappears into darkness, and the distance seems endless. Most people turn away, thinking it's too far, too unknown. But what if all you needed to do today was to take the first 2 steps, and tomorrow, 2 more? Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the journey unfolds. Months later, you look back and realize you're deep inside the forest, somewhere you couldn't even imagine standing when you began. This is how the 2-minute rule works. It makes the start so easy, the resistance so small, that you begin without argument, and once you're in motion, momentum gently carries you forward. The psychology behind it is fascinating. Our brains are wired to conserve energy. We naturally avoid anything that feels too big or uncertain, but when the step is so small it hardly registers as a threat, the brain doesn't resist. Over time, these repeated actions build a habit loop. In the basal ganglia, making the behavior automatic, what once required conscious effort becomes something you just do, like brushing your teeth. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, shares stories that illustrate this beautifully. There's the man who wanted to get fit but couldn't stick to going to the gym, so he set a rule. He'd drive to the gym, stay for 2 minutes, and then leave. It sounded absurd, but it worked because it built the habit of showing up. Soon, staying longer felt natural, and eventually, the man transformed his body and health. But it all started with 2 minutes that were almost too small to fail. The magic is that the 2-minute rule turns the hardest part, starting into something easy, even enjoyable. Once you've started, doing more often feels natural. But crucially, the rule doesn't require it. That's why it's sustainable. It's not driven by guilt or willpower alone, but by design. If you look back through history and philosophy, you find echoes of this wisdom everywhere. The Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." The step isn't impressive by itself, but it's what makes the journey possible. Stoic philosophers spoke about focusing on what is within our control. Often, that's just the small action right in front of us. Even ancient spiritual traditions encourage short daily practices, knowing that small rituals, done faithfully, shape character more powerfully than occasional grand acts. Consider how this applies in creative life. Many artists speak of the ritual of starting, sharpening pencils, laying out brushes, writing a single sentence, playing a single note. These small rituals aren't trivial. They're sacred openings to the deeper flow of creativity. The 2-minute rule is, in a sense, a ritual of starting. In relationships, too. It's often not the big moments, the expensive gifts, the dramatic gestures that create trust and love. It's the daily acts that take just a minute or two. A kind word, a hug, listening with attention. Over years, these moments stitch to lives together, and in our modern, distracted age, the rule becomes even more powerful. Our attention is pulled in so many directions. Starting anything meaningful feels harder than ever. But committing to 2 minutes, that feels possible, even refreshing. It becomes an antidote to the endless scrolling, the flood of information, the pressure to always do more. Think of a student overwhelmed by the thought of studying for final exams. The idea of sitting for hours feels impossible. But reading one paragraph, reviewing one flashcard, that's doable. And often, once the mind is engaged, studying continues naturally. Even if it doesn't, the habit of daily review keeps the material fresh and the anxiety lower. What's interesting is that the 2-minute rule isn't a trick to force yourself to do more. The point isn't to turn every 2-minute habit into an hour-long session. The point is to build trust in yourself, to become the kind of person who shows up. That trust, that identity, is what unlocks greater effort later, and it's built gently, without pressure. Over years, these small acts compound. This is the quiet math of life that often goes unnoticed. Doing something small daily doesn't add up. It multiplies. It changes how you see yourself, how others see you, and how opportunities appear. Someone who writes a single sentence every day might finish a book. Someone who saves a few coins daily might build significant savings. Someone who meditates for 2 minutes each morning might find a calmer mind. Even in crisis, we tend to idolize the dramatic moment, the athlete winning gold, the musician's dazzling performance, the entrepreneur's sudden success. But behind each of these are thousands of ordinary days when they showed up, often starting with something small. And because the 2-minute rule is so simple, it belongs to everyone. It's free. It doesn't require special talent, tools, or time. A billionaire and a student can both practice it. In a way, it's democratic. Anyone, anywhere, can start. Think, too, about the mental freedom it brings. Big goals can weigh heavily. I must lose 20 kilos. I must write a bestseller. I must get top grades. But I will do 2 minutes of exercise. I will write one sentence, or I will review one note. Feels light. You can breathe again. The weight lifts, and in that lighter space, action is born. Some worry this makes you complacent, but often the opposite is true. When the step is small, you actually do it. Doing leads to progress, which builds motivation, which leads to more doing. The cycle becomes upward, not downward. Even the number 2 minutes is symbolic. It could be 30 seconds, it could be 5 minutes. What matters isn't the number, it's the mindset. How can I make this so easy that it feels impossible not to do? For someone wanting to journal, it might mean writing today, I feel, and finishing the sentence. For someone wanting to get organized, it might mean clearing just one item from the desk. For someone wanting to learn guitar, it might mean picking up the instrument and strumming a single chord. Over time, these humble acts stitch themselves into the fabric of your day. You stop negotiating with yourself. You just do them, almost automatically. James Clear writes that habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. They don't seem like much day to day, but their effect over years is enormous. The 2-minute rule is how you start paying in to that account, every day. Consider an example from health again. Brushing teeth seems trivial, 2 minutes, twice a day. Yet most people do it without fail. Why? It's short, clear, and we've done it for years. Imagine if other healthy habits felt the same. If a short stretch before bed, a glass of water upon waking, or a deep breath before speaking, all became as automatic. The real transformation is internal. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop waiting for the perfect time. You learn to act, gently, daily. And in this rhythm, you discover a new kind of freedom. Freedom from the voice in your head that says, it's too hard, I don't have time, or I'm not ready. You discover that becoming isn't a single moment of decision, but 1,000 small votes, cast quietly each day. Over time, those small votes decide who you become, and perhaps the greatest gift of the 2-minute rule is that it reminds us. The first step is always within reach, of course. Let's continue keeping it in the same human, reflective, flowing style, diving deeper into stories, philosophy, cultural wisdom, everyday moments, and how this tiny rule quietly reshapes lives across centuries and contexts. We'll explore why starting small isn't weakness, but a profound strength, and why the 2-minute rule isn't merely about habits, but about learning to live, create, and care, one humble act at a time. Think of a garden in early spring. The soil still carries the cold memory of winter. Nothing has blossomed yet. You stand there, holding a single seed. The garden looks empty, and part of you doubts anything can grow here. But you bend down, press the seed into the soil, and cover it lightly. The act takes only a moment. The seed itself looks insignificant, a tiny thing against the vastness of earth and sky. And yet, in that 2-minute gesture, you have begun. You might not see growth tomorrow, maybe not next week, but the act of planting, humble, quick, almost invisible, is what makes everything possible. That, in essence, is the 2-minute rule, trusting that the smallest deliberate action matters, even when you can't see its impact yet. We live in a world that praises the big reveal, before and after photos, record-breaking achievements, viral breakthroughs. What we rarely see are the quiet mornings, the small repetitions, the moments of doubt overcome by a single, tiny action. And so, many people miss the truth. The extraordinary is built from the ordinary, practiced daily. Think of the calligrapher who dips her brush each morning, making just a few strokes before breakfast. Or the violinist who plays scales slowly for 2 minutes, listening deeply to each note. These acts might look modest to an outsider, but over decades, they refine a skill, deepen a craft, and shape a life. Even in faith traditions, the power of small, regular practice appears again and again. Short daily prayers, a candle lit at dawn, a single verse recited before sleep. Each ritual takes only a moment, but over years, it roots the soul, anchoring it through joy and sorrow alike. There's a quiet rebellion in choosing small, steady action over dramatic, short-lived effort. It goes against a culture obsessed with quick fixes and instant transformation. It says, real change honors the slow rhythm of nature, the gentle unfolding of time. Consider language learning. Many give up because they try to study for hours, burn out, and stop. But someone who reviews 5 new words each day, or practices speaking for just 2 minutes, might not impress anyone in the beginning. Yet a year later, they speak comfortably, not because they worked harder on any single day, but because they kept showing up. The same applies to writing. Many writers speak of days when inspiration won't come, when the page feels heavy, but they sit down anyway, even just to write a single sentence. Sometimes that sentence unlocks a paragraph. Sometimes it doesn't, but the habit of returning to the page is what keeps the creative door open. This is why the 2-minute rule isn't about results in the short term. It's about identity over the long term. When you show up daily, you cast votes for a new identity. I am someone who cares for my body. I am someone who writes. I am someone who learns. These small, daily votes often do more to shape who you become than any single burst of effort. Psychologists call this behavioral consistency. When our actions align, even in small ways, with the person we want to be, it strengthens that identity. Over time, it feels more natural to keep going than to stop. In Atomic Habits, James Clear uses the phrase, you don't have to be perfect, you just have to be consistent. The 2-minute rule makes consistency realistic, even on days when you're tired, busy, or unmotivated. Think of someone recovering from illness or grief. The idea of getting back to normal can feel overwhelming, even painful. But standing by the window for 2 minutes to breathe, or stepping outside for a short walk, can be a gentle first step toward life again. Small, compassionate acts matter most when the heart feels heavy. The rule also helps in moments of anxiety or procrastination. Often the mind imagines the task is bigger than it is, but telling yourself, I'll just do 2 minutes, shrinks the task to something your mind accepts. And once begun, the task rarely feels as hard as you feared. Even creative breakthroughs often start with small acts. Many inventions, works of art, or scientific discoveries began as notes scribbled on scraps of paper, sketches on napkins, or 2-minute reflections. The seed of an idea planted quickly, without overthinking. In leadership and work, too, small daily actions matter. Checking in with a teammate, writing a short thank you message, reading a single article to stay informed. These take little time but build trust, skill, and vision over years. And there's a paradox here. Starting small doesn't keep you small. It creates a stable base to grow bigger than you could by starting big. A tree with shallow roots can fall easily, no matter how tall it grows. But a tree that grows slowly, season by season, becomes resilient. When we choose 2 minutes, we respect the season we're in. On days when energy is high, 2 minutes might turn into an hour. On hard days, we might only do the minimum, and that's enough. The key is, the habit lives on. Consider the mental weight of unfinished tasks. They drain us silently, like background noise. The 2-minute rule can silence that noise. Instead of worrying about cleaning the whole kitchen, you start by washing a single plate. Instead of planning your whole week, you write down one task. And each small act quiets the mind. In relationships, too, moments matter more than we think. A quick message to say, I'm thinking of you. A 2-minute call to hear someone's voice. These often mean more than grand gestures saved for later. Over a lifetime, what people remember isn't always the big days, but the daily warmth. The cup of tea shared, the short walk together, the goodnight words. Small actions build deep connection. In the end, the 2-minute rule is about hope. It says, no matter how far you feel from your goal, the next step is always small enough to take, and every step counts. It's also about gentleness to yourself, your process, your journey. You don't have to fight your way to change. You can walk there, 2 minutes at a time, and it's about trust. That over days, weeks, months, the small things you do will shape you more deeply than you can yet see. So, tomorrow morning, when you feel resistance to write, to move, to learn, to speak, to heal, ask yourself, what's the 2-minute version of this? And begin. Not because it will finish everything, but because it will start something, and starting quietly is where every story of change truly begins.